My name is Evelyn Carter, and 3 months ago I learned how quiet the world can become when the word cancer enters your life. I am 61 years old, a retired financial consultant, a widow of 8 years, and the mother of one daughter, Lauren Carter. For most of my life, I believed I had done everything right. I worked hard, invested wisely, and made sure Lauren would never struggle the way I did in my 20s. I built a home filled with warmth, paid for the best schools, and even set aside a $250,000 trust fund for her future. I thought that was what love looked like: preparation, sacrifice, and protection. The morning Dr. Rachel Adams confirmed my diagnosis, the hospital room felt too bright. I remember staring at her lips as she spoke, but I barely heard the medical terms. Chemotherapy. Aggressive stage. Immediate treatment. Those were the only words that stayed with me. I nodded like a calm adult, asked practical questions, and scheduled my first chemo session before leaving the office. I have always handled problems logically. Panic has never been my style. But that afternoon, when I sat alone in my car, my hands shook on the steering wheel. I realized that strength in business is very different from strength in sickness. The first person I wanted to call was Lauren. She is 32 now, living in Chicago, working in marketing for a tech company. She has always been ambitious, modern, and independent. We were not the kind of mother and daughter who talked every single day, but I believed our bond was steady. I pressed her name in my phone and waited for her voice. It rang 5 times before going to voicemail. I left a simple message. "Hi sweetheart, it's Mom. I just came from the doctor. I have some news. Call me when you can." I kept my tone light, almost cheerful. I did not want to worry her. That evening, she texted back instead of calling. "In meetings all day. What's going on?" I stared at the screen for a long moment before replying. "It's cancer. I start chemo next week." I watched the 3 dots appear, disappear, and appear again. Finally she responded. "Oh my God. I'm so sorry. That's a lot. I don't even know what to say." I told her she did not have to say anything. I just wanted her to know. She said she would try to visit soon, but work was intense and she had deadlines. I understood. I have always understood ambition. The first chemo session was harder than I expected. The cold smell of disinfectant, the soft beeping of machines, the way the nurses moved with practiced kindness. Dr. Rachel Adams explained every step with patience. She held my hand for a moment longer than necessary before the 4 was placed. "You're not alone in this," she said. I believed her in that room. But when I returned home, the house felt heavier than before. I called Lauren again that evening. No answer. I texted her the next day to tell her I felt nauseous but hopeful. No reply. By the 3rd day, her phone went straight to voicemail. I thought maybe it was a network issue. Maybe her phone died. Maybe she was overwhelmed. I tried not to create stories in my head. A week passed. Then 2. I sent her updates after each chemo session. "Hair is starting to thin. Feeling tired today. Doctor says treatment is working." Every message remained unread. That is when I noticed the small detail that changed everything. Her profile picture disappeared. Her status vanished. I typed her number into a different phone, one belonging to my neighbor, and the call went through immediately. That was the moment my chest tightened more than any chemo side effect. My daughter had blocked me. I sat at my kitchen table staring at the wall clock ticking slowly above the stove. I replayed every conversation in my mind. Had I complained too much? Had I sounded weak? Was I too emotional? I remembered one particular message she sent before disappearing. "Mom, I can't handle heavy stuff right now. Work is already draining. I need space from negativity." At the time, I thought she meant space from the fear, not from me. But now the meaning felt clear. My illness had become an inconvenience. During the following weeks, neighbors brought soup. Church members sent flowers. Even Daniel Brooks, my longtime family attorney, stopped by just to check on me after hearing about my diagnosis through mutual friends. "If you need anything at all, call me," he said. I smiled and thanked him, but I did not tell him about Lauren. I was not ready to say it out loud. There is something humiliating about admitting your own child has chosen silence during your weakest moment. I kept hoping she would call. I kept imagining an apology, a tearful explanation, some reasonable excuse that would make this make sense. Instead, I saw photos of her online through mutual friends. Weekend brunches. Corporate events. Smiling selfies. Life moving forward without interruption. Meanwhile, I watched strands of my hair collect on my pillow each morning. One afternoon, after my third round of chemo, I felt unusually weak. I sat on the edge of my bed and reached for my phone again. I stared at Lauren's name, knowing the call would not go through. For the first time, something inside me shifted. Not anger. Not revenge. Just clarity. I had spent my entire life protecting her future. I had built a trust fund to ensure she would always have security, opportunity, and comfort. $250,000 sitting under my management until she reached 35. I had always planned to release it early if she needed it for a home or a family. But as I sat there, dizzy and alone, I asked myself a quiet question. What is the purpose of preparing someone for the future if they cannot stand beside you in the present? That question did not come from bitterness. It came from awakening. Cancer has a strange way of removing illusions. It forces you to measure what truly matters. In that silent bedroom, with the late afternoon light coming through the curtains, I realized something painful but necessary. Support is not automatic. Love is not guaranteed. And sometimes, boundaries are born in the middle of suffering. I picked up my phone, scrolled to another contact, and paused over the name Daniel Brooks. I did not press call yet. I simply looked at it, breathing slowly, understanding that the next decision I made would not come from weakness. It would come from strength. And that was the day everything began to change. The morning after I stared at Daniel Brooks' name on my phone, I woke up with a different kind of heaviness in my chest. It was not just the sickness. It was not just the side effects of chemotherapy. It was the quiet understanding that something in my relationship with Evelyn Carter had shifted in a way that could not be ignored. I had always believed that time fixes distance. I told myself she was overwhelmed. I told myself she was young and scared. I told myself that maybe she did not know how to face illness. But deep inside, another voice was asking a harder question. If I was strong enough to face cancer, why was she not strong enough to face me? I moved slowly that morning, making tea in my kitchen while the sunlight touched the counter. I looked around the house I had built for us. Every corner held a memory of Lauren growing up. Her school pictures still lined the hallway. Her piano sat untouched in the living room. I had never removed those pieces of her childhood because I believed they were signs of connection. Now they felt like reminders of something fragile. After breakfast, I picked up my phone again and this time I pressed Daniel Brooks' number. He answered on the second ring with his calm, steady voice. "Evelyn, how are you holding up?" I appreciated that he asked about my health first. I told him honestly that treatment was difficult but manageable. Then I paused. Silence filled the line for a moment before I said what I had been afraid to say. "Daniel, I need to review Lauren's trust fund." He did not sound surprised. Daniel has been my attorney for over 15 years. He helped me structure my investments after my husband passed. He knows my habits, my caution, my discipline. "Of course," he replied. "Is there something specific you're concerned about?" I explained that nothing had been misused. The account was intact. The investments were steady. But I wanted to understand my control, my options, and my authority. Daniel spoke clearly. You are the sole grantor and manager until she turns 35. You can freeze distributions. You can revise terms. The trust exists because you created it. His words were not emotional. They were factual. Still, they landed heavily in my heart. The trust existed because I created it. I ended the call feeling both empowered and saddened. I never imagined I would consider adjusting something that was meant to protect my own child. Later that afternoon, I received a message from an old family friend. She had seen Lauren at a networking event in Chicago. She looked great, the message read. Busy as ever. I stared at the words. I did not expect Lauren to stop living her life because I was sick. That would be unreasonable. But I had expected a call. A visit. A simple effort. I opened our old message thread and scrolled back through years of conversations. Birthday wishes. Photos of vacations. Links to articles about career advice. I saw how often I had been the one initiating contact. I saw how many times I had offered help, advice, or money without hesitation. Then I noticed something I had missed before. In the weeks before my diagnosis, Lauren had asked about early access to part of her trust fund. She said she wanted to invest in a startup opportunity with friends. I told her gently that the trust was designed for long-term security, not risky ventures. She did not argue at the time. She simply responded with a short, okay. Now I wondered if that conversation had planted a seed of resentment. That evening, I gathered the courage to look at her social media page from my laptop. I do not often check such things, but I needed clarity. I saw photos of rooftop dinners, captions about protecting your energy, and quotes about removing negativity from your life. My heart tightened when I read those words. Was I the negativity? Was my illness something she felt she needed to remove? The thought hurt more than the chemotherapy ever could. But pain can sometimes bring focus. I began to see the situation more clearly. Lauren had grown used to stability. She had grown used to knowing that her future was secured by a fund she did not build herself. Perhaps my illness reminded her that security is fragile. Perhaps it frightened her. Or perhaps she simply chose comfort over responsibility. I did not know the full answer, but I knew this: love without accountability creates imbalance. Over the next few days, I stopped sending updates. I stopped checking whether my messages were delivered. I focused on my treatment, on eating properly, on resting. Dr. Rachel Adams noticed the change in my tone during our next appointment. You seem thoughtful today, she said gently. I smiled and told her I was learning to protect my energy. She nodded as if she understood more than I said. That phrase stayed with me. Protecting my energy. I had spent years protecting Lauren's future. Now I needed to protect my present. One afternoon, Daniel Brooks sent me the official documents outlining the trust's terms. I sat at my desk reviewing each page carefully. The numbers were solid. The investments had grown well over time. $250,000, designed as a foundation for her life. I ran my hand over the papers and felt the weight of what they represented. This was not just money. It was years of work. Years of sacrifice. Years of belief in my daughter's character. As I closed the folder, I made a decision that felt steady rather than emotional. I would not act out of anger. I would act out of clarity. If Lauren believed distance was necessary, then distance would extend beyond phone calls. If she believed she could remove herself from my hardest season, then I would reassess what access she had to the resources built during my strongest seasons. This was not punishment. It was alignment. A relationship must reflect mutual care. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. Not because the pain was gone. Not because the sickness was easier. But because I had stopped pretending. I could not control my diagnosis. I could not control my daughter's choices. But I could control my boundaries. And for the first time since hearing the word cancer in that bright hospital room, I felt something returning to me. It was not anger. It was not revenge. It was dignity. A week after reviewing the trust documents Daniel Brooks sent me, I scheduled an appointment to see him in person. I did not want to make such an important decision over the phone. If I was going to take action, it had to be done calmly, professionally, and without emotion controlling the process. The morning of the meeting, I dressed carefully, even though chemotherapy had already begun to thin my hair. I wore a soft cream scarf and a navy blazer. Looking presentable was not about pride. It was about reminding myself that I was still Evelyn Carter, not just a patient in treatment. When I arrived at Daniel's office, he greeted me with his usual steady handshake and concerned eyes. He had already prepared the paperwork on his desk. We sat across from each other in a quiet conference room with large windows overlooking the city. For a moment, neither of us spoke. He waited patiently, allowing me the space to begin. "Daniel," I said gently, "I've had time to think. I need to place a temporary freeze on Lauren's trust fund." He nodded slowly, not in agreement or disagreement, but in understanding. "Is this decision coming from anger?" he asked carefully. I appreciated the question. I had asked myself the same thing every night before sleeping. "No," I replied honestly. "It's coming from clarity." I explained everything. The blocked calls. The silence. The social media posts. The weeks without a single check-in. Daniel listened without interruption. When I finished, he folded his hands on the table and said something that stayed with me. "Evelyn, money is not just financial power. It's emotional power too. Freezing the trust will send a message. Are you ready for the consequences of that message?" I took a deep breath. I knew there would be consequences. There would be anger. Accusations. Maybe even public embarrassment. But I also knew what had already happened. Silence during chemotherapy is also a message. "Yes," I said quietly. "I am ready." The paperwork was straightforward. Because I was the sole grantor and manager, I had the authority to pause any distributions and add conditions for future access. We adjusted the trust terms to require direct communication and evidence of active relationship before any early release could occur. The principal amount would remain invested and protected. Nothing was being destroyed. It was simply being held. Daniel handed me the pen. My hand did not shake as I signed. I felt steady, almost peaceful. After the meeting, I walked slowly back to my car. The air felt cool against my face. For the first time since my diagnosis, I did not feel like life was happening to me. I felt like I was participating in it again. 3 days later, the reaction came. Lauren attempted to access a portion of the trust for what appeared to be a business-related expense. The request was automatically flagged as frozen. Within minutes, my phone rang. It was her. I stared at the screen for several seconds before answering. Her voice came quickly, sharp and confused. "Mom, what is going on with my trust fund?" It was the first time I had heard her voice in nearly 2 months. I felt a mix of relief and sadness. "Hello, Lauren," I said softly. "It's good to hear from you." There was a pause on the line, as if she had not expected calmness. "I just tried to move some money, and it says the account is restricted." "Did you do that?" she asked. I chose my words carefully. "Yes. I placed a temporary hold on it." Her tone changed immediately. "Why would you do that? That money was promised to me." I closed my eyes briefly, gathering patience. "Support was promised to me too," I replied gently. Silence filled the line. I could hear her breathing. "Mom, I've been busy. You know how work is. I told you I needed space." Her explanation felt rehearsed, distant. "Space is different from disappearance," I said. "I was going through chemotherapy, Lauren. I needed my daughter." She did not respond right away. When she did, her voice carried frustration. I didn't know how to deal with it. It was overwhelming. I can't handle hospitals and sickness. It drains me. Her honesty was blunt, almost cold. For a moment, I imagined arguing, raising my voice, listing every sacrifice I had ever made. But that would not change anything. Instead, I spoke slowly. I understand fear. I understand being overwhelmed. But blocking me was a choice. She exhaled loudly. So you're punishing me? She asked. No, I answered. I'm setting a boundary. The conversation did not end with resolution. It ended with tension. She said she needed time to think. I told her I would be here when she was ready to talk properly. After the call ended, I sat quietly in my living room. My heart felt heavy, but not broken. The truth had finally been spoken aloud. Later that evening, Daniel called to confirm that the trust freeze had been officially processed. Be prepared, he warned gently. She may push back harder. I thanked him and assured him I was steady. Over the next few days, Lauren sent several short messages. Some were defensive. Some were emotional. One message read, I can't believe you do this while you're sick. I responded simply, I can't believe you disappeared while I was sick. There was no drama. No long arguments. Just truth. Dr. Rachel Adams noticed a difference in me during my next treatment session. You seem lighter, she observed. I smiled faintly. I think I finally stopped begging for love, I said. She squeezed my hand gently before adjusting the foreline. That night, I looked at myself in the mirror. My scarf covered most of my thinning hair. My skin looked pale. But my eyes were clear. I realized something important. Cancer had taken my strength physically, but it had sharpened my emotional vision. I could see what I had been avoiding for years. Lauren had grown comfortable with provision, but not necessarily committed to presence. The trust fund freeze was not about money. It was about balance. It was about teaching that love is not a one-way investment. As I turned off the lights and prepared for bed, my phone buzzed again. It was a simple message from Lauren. Can we talk in person this weekend? I stared at the screen for a long moment. The story was not over. The confrontation was coming. But for the first time since all of this began, the silence between us had cracked. And sometimes, even a crack is enough to let truth enter. The weekend arrived quietly, but the weight of it pressed heavily on my heart. Lauren texted me her flight details on Friday night. Landing at 10:15 a.m. Saturday, she wrote. There was no emoji, no warmth, just information. Still, it was more communication than I had received in weeks. Saturday morning, I woke earlier than usual. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea, watching the steam rise slowly into the air. My body felt tired from chemotherapy, but my mind felt alert. This conversation would not be about anger. It would be about truth. Around 11 a.m., I heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. My heart beat faster than I expected. When the doorbell rang, I stood slowly, adjusted my scarf, and walked to the door. When I opened it, there she was. Lauren Carter. My daughter looked the same, polished and put together in a beige coat, her hair neatly styled, her posture confident. For a second, we simply looked at each other. I saw hesitation in her eyes, something softer than the sharp tone from our phone call. Hi, Mom, she said quietly. Hi, Lauren, I replied, stepping aside to let her in. She walked into the house slowly, glancing around as if everything felt both familiar and distant. We sat in the living room, the same place where she used to do homework after school. The piano remained untouched in the corner. The silence between us was thick, but not hostile. Finally, she spoke. I didn't think you would actually freeze the trust, she said. Her voice was controlled, but I could hear emotion beneath it. I folded my hands in my lap. I didn't think you would block me during chemotherapy, I answered gently. She looked down at the floor. I told you I was overwhelmed, she said. I didn't know how to handle it. I nodded slowly. Overwhelmed is human. Blocking your mother while she is fighting cancer is a decision. She inhaled sharply. You make it sound so cruel, she whispered. It felt cruel, I said honestly. The room grew quiet again. Lauren stood up and walked toward the window. You've always been strong, Mom, she continued. You handle everything. I guess I didn't think you needed me the way other people need support. Her words surprised me. They were not defensive. They were revealing. Strength doesn't cancel the need for love, I replied softly. I have been strong my whole life so you would never have to worry. But during chemo, I was not asking for solutions. I was asking for presence. She turned to face me, her eyes slightly red. Hospitals scare me, she admitted. Watching you sick scared me. I didn't know what to say, so I chose silence. I felt a mix of sadness and understanding. Fear can make people selfish without them realizing it. But fear does not remove responsibility. Lauren, I said carefully, when your father passed away, I was terrified. I had no idea how I would raise you alone. But I showed up every day. Not because I wasn't scared, but because you needed me. Tears filled her eyes now. I didn't think of it that way, she whispered. I leaned back gently against the couch. My body felt weak, but my voice remained steady. The trust fund freeze is not revenge, I explained. It is a reflection. If our relationship can pause during my hardest season, then financial access can pause too. Love and provision must move together. She walked back to the couch and sat down, closer this time. It felt like you were taking away my future, she said. I felt betrayed. I looked at her carefully. And I felt abandoned, I responded. Do you see how both feelings exist? She nodded slowly. I guess I never thought about how it looked from your side, she admitted. I was thinking about my stress, my workload, my life. I appreciated her honesty. Growth begins when excuses end. Lauren, I don't want control over you, I said gently. I want connection with you. The trust fund was created from love. But love cannot be one-directional. I needed to know whether you value me or just the security I built. She wiped her tears with the back of her hand. That's not fair, she said softly. I love you. I held her gaze. Then show me, I replied. The simplicity of those words hung in the air. There was no anger behind them. Just expectation. For the first time since she arrived, Lauren's posture changed. The confidence in her shoulders softened. What do you want from me? She asked quietly. I did not hesitate. Call me. Visit when you can. Ask about my treatment. Be present even when it's uncomfortable. I don't need perfection. I need effort. She nodded slowly, absorbing every word. And the trust? She asked carefully. It remains protected, I said. It is not gone. It is paused. When our relationship feels healthy and mutual again, we can review it. She looked relieved but still thoughtful. So this is conditional? She asked. Yes, I answered calmly. Just like respect. The honesty between us felt heavy but clean. There were no raised voices. No dramatic gestures. Just two adults facing truth. After a long pause, Lauren moved closer and gently placed her hand over mine. I'm sorry I disappeared, she said. Her voice trembled slightly. I should have done better. Hearing those words did not erase the weeks of silence, but they mattered. Thank you, I said softly. That's a start. We spent the rest of the afternoon talking about my treatment plan. I explained the side effects. She listened carefully, asking questions this time. The distance that once felt like a wall now felt like a bridge under construction. It was not complete, but it existed. When evening came, she stood at the door preparing to leave for her hotel. Before stepping out, she hugged me gently, careful not to squeeze too tightly. "I'll call you tomorrow," she said. I looked into her eyes and saw something new. Not entitlement. Not frustration. Something closer to awareness. "I'll answer," I replied. After she drove away, I closed the door and leaned against it quietly. My body felt exhausted, but my spirit felt steady. Boundaries had not destroyed our relationship. They had clarified it. And sometimes, clarity is the strongest form of love. The morning after Lauren left, the house felt different. It was still quiet, but it was not the heavy kind of silence that had filled it before. It was a thoughtful silence, the kind that comes after truth has been spoken. I woke up slowly, my body aching from treatment, yet my heart feeling lighter than it had in months. I sat by the window with my tea and allowed myself to reflect on everything that had happened. Cancer had entered my life without permission. It had shaken my health, my routine, and my sense of control. But it had also revealed something deeper. It had exposed the foundation of my relationships. It had shown me what was real and what was assumed. Later that morning, my phone rang. It was Lauren. For a brief second, I felt nervous, but I answered calmly. "Good morning, Mom," she said, her voice softer than before. "Good morning, sweetheart," I replied. We spoke for 20 minutes. She asked about my appointment schedule. She asked how I was feeling physically. She even asked what I had eaten for breakfast. The questions were simple, but they mattered. They were signs of presence. After we ended the call, I did not feel dramatic relief or overwhelming joy. I felt something steadier. I felt balance beginning to return. Over the next few weeks, Lauren kept her word. She called every other day. Sometimes the conversations were short. Sometimes they were long. She began sending small care packages, herbal tea, comfortable scarves, handwritten notes. None of those things erased the pain of her earlier absence, but they showed effort. Effort is the beginning of repair. During one of my chemotherapy sessions, Dr. Rachel Adams noticed the change in my mood. "You look stronger today," she said with a warm smile. I laughed softly. Stronger in spirit, maybe. My body still has complaints. She adjusted the four gently and said, "Healing is not only physical." Her words stayed with me. Healing is not only physical. In many ways, this chapter of my life was teaching me more about emotional strength than any business challenge I had ever faced. I began to understand that love without boundaries becomes quiet resentment. For years, I gave freely to Lauren without requiring emotional maturity in return. I mistook provision for preparation. I believed that if I secured her financial future, everything else would fall into place. But life does not work that way. Security does not build character. Adversity reveals it. One afternoon, Lauren visited again. This time, she did not come with tension or defense. She came with humility. We sat together in the living room, and she spoke openly. "Mom, I've been thinking a lot," she began. "I realized I have always seen the trust fund as something guaranteed. I never connected it to your effort or your sacrifice." I listened quietly. She continued, "When you froze it, I felt scared. But not just because of the money. I felt scared because it made me see how distant I had become." Her honesty was no longer forced. It was thoughtful. "Growth usually begins with discomfort," I replied gently. "I didn't freeze the trust to hurt you. I froze it to protect what matters." She nodded slowly. "I understand that now." A few days later, I called Daniel Brooks to update him. I told him that Lauren had been consistent in her communication and visits. He listened carefully and then asked, "Are you considering lifting the freeze?" I paused before answering. "Not yet," I said calmly. "Trust rebuilds through time, not emotion." He agreed. There was no urgency. The trust fund remained protected, not as a weapon, but as a reminder that actions have weight. As months passed, my treatment progressed. Some days were harder than others. There were mornings when I struggled to get out of bed. There were nights when fatigue felt overwhelming. But I was no longer facing those moments alone. Lauren began attending some appointments with me when her schedule allowed. She sat quietly beside me in the hospital room, sometimes holding my hand. The first time she did that, she did not say much. She simply squeezed my fingers gently. It was a small gesture, but it carried more meaning than any apology could. I realized something important during those visits. People do not always fail because they lack love. Sometimes they fail because they lack courage. Lauren had not disappeared because she did not care. She disappeared because she was afraid. But fear cannot excuse absence forever. Responsibility requires stepping forward even when you are uncomfortable. One evening, as we sat together watching an old movie, Lauren turned to me and said, "Mom, thank you for not giving up on me." I smiled softly. "I didn't freeze the trust to push you away," I said. "I did it to call you back." She leaned her head lightly on my shoulder, careful of my weakness. "It worked," she whispered. And in that moment, I understood the true lesson of everything we had been through. Boundaries are not walls. They are doors with locks. They protect what is valuable while still allowing entry to those who knock with respect. Eventually, after consistent effort and visible change, I called Daniel again. "I am ready to adjust the terms," I told him. We modified the trust conditions to allow gradual access, tied to milestones and continued involvement. It was not about control. It was about accountability. When I informed Lauren, she did not celebrate the financial update. She thanked me for trusting her again. That response meant more than any amount of money. As my health slowly stabilized and treatment moved toward completion, I found myself reflecting often on the journey. Cancer tested my body. Silence tested my heart. Boundaries tested my courage. But through it all, I discovered something powerful. Strength is not only about enduring pain. It is about choosing wisdom when you have every reason to react emotionally. I learned that love must be protected, not assumed. I learned that money cannot replace presence. I learned that even in sickness, you can reclaim your voice. Most importantly, I learned that consequences do not destroy relationships when they are rooted in truth. They refine them. Today, when I look at Lauren, I do not see entitlement. I see growth. I see someone who was forced to confront her immaturity and chose to rise above it. And when I look at myself, I no longer see a woman abandoned during chemo. I see a woman who refused to let illness silence her standards. If there is one lesson this story carries, it is this: love is powerful, but love with boundaries is transformative. You can be kind without being weak. You can forgive without forgetting the lesson. You can support someone without sacrificing your dignity. Cancer did not break my family. Silence almost did. But clarity rebuilt it. And sometimes, the hardest seasons of life are the very ones that teach us how to protect what matters most.